This is for the people that have an interest, the people that want to be involved.
There was no collusion at all.
This is for the people that are upset and looking for a place to use their voice.
Both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
This is for the people that want to make a difference, for the people that want to be on the right side of history.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
And I get it. In today's society, it's difficult to have a political opinion and to make it be known. This can be due to fear or because you feel like you don't understand what's going on.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
But if he can do it, so can you. Join me every Sunday on Backstories, where we'll discuss all the top political stories and how it applies to all of us. And trust me, this is not your everyday show on politics. Welcome back to Backstories, everybody. I am the host, Brandon. As always, excited to be here to give you the latest in politics this Sunday. So, we are all going to take a trip back to 2016, and we all know that during that time it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, and they were both running to be president of the United States. However, what is more famously, or you can argue that it is infamously known, is that Donald Trump had told his supporters that should he be elected, that he would win so much that literally everyone in the country would be sick of all the winning that he would do. So, technically, one would think that since he did arguably win the 2016 election, that we should be seeing all this winning and we should be tired of winning, especially considering that he is a Republican and he had a Republican majority in the House of Representatives, and he also had a Republican majority in the Senate. One would think that he'd be able to do any type of legislation that he wanted to do, that he'd be able to make up any kind of law that he wanted to make, and that he'd just be this super awesome, super successful, quote-unquote, president. However, if you pay attention to the news and to the current events that have been going on in the world, every time we see a Republican, every time we see Donald Trump, every time we see one of their supporters, they are quite literally angry all the time. They're either viciously attacking someone, they are shooting some place up, they are killing people, or they're just all over the TV spreading this racist rhetoric all across the country. And I'm just a little bit confused and even a little bit concerned because if you're winning, this is not what winning looks like. Donald Trump might say that this is what winning looks like, but let me assure you it is not. When you're a winner, you exude a certain confidence, a certain swagger, you have a certain strength about yourself because you walk in truth. You have nothing to hide. What we've seen from Donald Trump and from the Republican Party and all of their supporters is quite simply, to me, in my opinion, the equivalent of the behavior of a petulant, spoiled, annoying, bratty child, right? Let's start with the Republican tax cuts that they passed in 2017. Donald Trump and his corrupt Republicans, the ones that are in Congress, they constantly and repeatedly said that these tax cuts were going to pay for themselves because the tax cuts were going to boost the economy. See, the Republicans' theory of economics kind of works like this. If they cut taxes along the lines of corporations and rich people, they believe that those corporations and rich people will then take those tax cuts and, quote, trickle them down to the workers. And then the workers will spend more money in shopping and whatnot, and then the government will make it back up on the back end from sales taxes instead of from income taxes. However, this has never worked. It's not worked Since Reagan tried to do it, since Bush 1 tried to do it, Bush 2 failed at it, and we can all certainly expect that if they failed at it, Donald Trump's going to fail at it because he fails at everything. And here's the proof that they are failing with these tax cuts. Quote, "The growing budget gap means the Treasury must borrow more money to keep the government running. The Treasury expects to borrow a total of $1.338 trillion from global investors this calendar year. That would be 145% higher than the $546 billion that the federal government borrowed last year. This would be the highest level of borrowing since 2010, when the American economy was struggling to recover from the Great Recession." End quote. So what that quite literally means, everyone, is that Donald Trump and his Republican sidekicks in Congress have added $1.5 trillion to the federal deficit. Because when you cut any money from the government, we still have to have that money come from somewhere, because we still have to pay for the military, we have to pay for food stamps, we have to pay for Social Security, Medicare, we got to pay Congress, we got to pay Donald Trump. So they cut this money expecting this trickle-down effect to happen amongst us, because we were going to get so much more money from it. We now needed the government to have it again, and the government doesn't have it. So now we have to borrow more and more and more and more money from other countries. So, in addition to that argument, the Republicans also argued that after they passed these tax cuts, people's incomes were going to go up dramatically. Again, this is that trickle-down effect that they believe in. And that equated to a partial truth, if you will. Quote, "Data from the large public companies, however, suggests that most workers received relatively small shares of their employer's corporate tax savings. The non-profit research group Just Capital, which is tracking 1,000 large public companies' reports of how they are spending their tax cuts, calculates that the typical worker at one of these large companies has received about $225 this year in increased salary, a one-time bonus, or both. And those were what were attributable to the new law." End quote. So, all of that hoopla that I just read to you is the author's way of saying that the Republicans and Donald Trump cut these taxes from rich people and from corporations, expecting, or at least lying and telling people that these corporations and rich people were going to take that extra money, give the workers that work for them more in wages, and then we would, because we're often the people that are the workers, would go out and spend more money because now we have more money in our wages, which is simply not how it's happening, and it's never ever happened every time they've tried to do it. Basically, the corporations and the rich people, with these tax cuts, they got thousands and some of them even millions of tax relief, and we got the equivalent of $225 extra per year. And let me tell you that $225 certainly goes a long way now, doesn't it? I mean, there's just an unlimited amount of things that you can buy for $225 extra dollars per year. I mean, certainly. And for the people that are listening to me on iTunes and podcasts, certainly, if you can't tell the sarcasm on my face, look at the YouTube video so you can see how I'm just beaming with enthusiasm. At any rate, I want to reiterate again that this is what the Republicans do with the economy every single time that they're in charge. They cut the taxes of the rich people, and they tell the people that are dumb enough to believe it, the everyday Americans, the middle class, the lower class people that work for these corporations that get tax cuts, they lie to these people, to us, and they tell us that we're going to get wage increases, and it never happens. Yet the people that vote for the Republican Party continue to fall for this shit every single time. moving on. Continuing on in the arena of economics. The stock markets have been taking large hits lately. One would think that the Republican Party, that once esteemed itself on being the party of truth, the party of family values, the party of just great things and conservatism, one would think that since they're such a great party, that they would have enough integrity to own up to their failures with these failed, pathetic tax cuts. But they have not done that. Donald Trump, being the overdramatic gossip girl that he certainly is, he ran to Twitter when the stock market started crashing, and he blamed the Democrats for the stock markets crashing. And he said that it was the Democrats' pending investigations of him that are why people are taking their money from the stock markets and they're running. They're running for the hills because the Democrats are out to get everybody. I'm not going to present that tweet to you because I really don't give a damn, for one, about Donald Trump's tweets. They're really irrelevant. Again, they're just teenage high school drama on the internet from a 70-something-year-old geriatric man. So that's one thing. But I also just want to reiterate the fact that if people felt like the Democrats were such a threat to the stock markets, they would have never voted for the Democrats to take the House and to take some Republican seats in the Senate. They would have never done it. So Donald Trump, your argument, like anything that comes out of your mouth, is baseless and stupid. I do want to have another quick sidebar addressing the Democrats and they're talking about these investigations. It is known that the Democrats are going to take control of the House in January of 2019. That's how midterm elections work. They happen in November. That's how any elections work, really. They happen in November, and then whatever happens in November takes effect in January. So in January of 2019, the Democrats will take over the House. They will take whatever seats they gained in the Senate and the ones that they lost. So the Democrats have been talking nonstop since they know that they're going to take control. They've been talking nonstop about how they're going to investigate this and they're going to investigate that. And to me, it's really foolish, it's really dumb, because they're not talking about the things that they're going to do to make the country great again. Because Donald Trump has certainly failed at doing that, so who's going to do it now? They have to quit taking the bait, because this is exactly what Donald Trump and his dumbass base wants the Democrats to do. But I do also want to state, going back to the original theme of the story, I apologize, I get on these sidebars sometimes, that it is not the Democrats' fault that the stock markets are tumbling, because they were tumbling before the Democrats' midterm election results ever happened. Quote, the markets had experienced declines before last week's midterm elections, with some swings larger than that seen on Monday, end quote, and Monday being the day that Donald Trump sent that ridiculous bullshit tweet out into the internet. So this is just another way of Donald Trump and his corrupt, idiotic, dumb Republicans. This is just another sign of their not winning behavior, because this is not winning. None of what I've given to you this far is anything resembling winning. This is all losing. I call it not winning behavior. So we all know how much Donald Trump, how much he loves the immigrants and how much he loves DACA, right? I mean, he loves immigrants so much that he wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico to stop the Mexicans from coming into the United States. And he loves immigrants so much that he wants to stop or put strong restrictions on legal, as in acceptable, immigration. It's almost as if he doesn't know Melania, his estranged wife, is an immigrant, and that his parents were immigrants, and that all the white people here are immigrants, technically, and so are the African Americans. We're all immigrants here. But, no one took history, so no one knows that, right? So, DACA is the deferred action for childhood arrivals. And it was basically an order put out by President Barack Obama to protect children that were brought to this country by their parents, whether it was legally or illegally. It was to allow them to stay here because they were children when they were brought here, and it was not their fault that their parents got them here. Donald Trump loves DACA and the DACA children so much, and some of them are adults now. He loves them so much that he wants to do away with DACA. However, on November 9th, 2018, a federal appeals court blocked Donald Trump from removing DACA. Yet another not winning event for Donald Trump. Quote, the ruling from a panel on the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals means a nationwide injunction allowing the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals, DACA program, to continue and will remain in effect, end quote. Surprisingly, Donald Trump went on to call this good news. But how could he call this good news if he lost? Because he did lose, right? He's calling it good news because he wanted the court to rule this way so he could take this case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is where he has now stacked the Supreme Court with 2 additional extremist Republican judges. So now that he has his extremist judges on the court, he most certainly will win if we take the DACA court case to the Supreme Court. So, no matter what happens with that, when he goes to the Supreme Court or not, I just want to point out that this is still a loss, and this is the second time Donald Trump has lost when it comes to DACA, and, you know, it's not winning. It's not winning streak. So, in addition to all of this not winning, Trump and the Republicans, it's certainly understandable now why they have been so angry, why they lash out, why they act like immature children. I mean, because they continue to lose, even though they are the majority power in Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, in the Supreme Court, in the Senate. They even have Donald Trump squatting in the White House. I mean, they're pissed because they can't have their way. Because the Republican Party is a dying party, if you didn't know. No one cares for conservatism. No one cares for wanting to live back in the 1920s, which is where they keep trying to drag us back to. They're acting out because America has a changing demographic, and white people are slowly, each and every day, becoming more and more of the minority. And they have a problem with that because they feel threatened. They feel threatened that the minorities now are going to take away the privilege that they've been benefiting off of for generations. I don't know really what to tell them to remedy that, but America's voice has spoken, and we're not going to have this nonsense, this idiotic, childlike behavior from these old white men. It's just not going to happen. And it's not going to happen from old white Republican women either, especially the one named Cindy Hyde-Smith, who is the Republican senator for Mississippi. On Sunday, November 8th, 2018, she had to say the following, quote, "If he invited me to a public hanging, I'd be in the front row," end quote. This was clearly a reference to the public lynchings of black people that took place in Mississippi. And Mississippi is a state where the most lynchings of African Americans happen compared to any other state in the United States. Most of them happen in Mississippi. Quote, "Statistics from the NAACP show that nearly one-eighth of the 4,743 lynchings that took place between 1882 and 1968 those that occurred in the United States took place in Mississippi," end quote. Not only is Cindy Hyde-Smith refusing to apologize for her dumb comments, what's even more notable is that Cindy Hyde-Smith has to now enter a runoff with Democrat and African American Mike Espy on November 27th, 2018. And this is no doubt a racist dog whistle to get her racist base out to vote. And lastly, we have this demagogue, this demon, Steve King, who is a House of Representative member from Iowa. Now, I call him a demon and a demagogue because, he's been blatantly out in the open with his racist, extremist, nationalist views for years, okay? This idiot, he dared a magazine to release this recording that they supposedly had of him calling immigrants dirt. And because he dared them, they did it. Here it is.
So I guess I'm going to have to go get some dirt from Mexico to grow the next batch.
Trust me, it's on its way.
Well, yeah, there's plenty of dirt. It's coming from West Coast, too. And a lot of other places besides. This is the most dirt we've ever seen. This is actually not supposed to start from this.
And if that wasn't revolting enough for you, I'm sad to report to you that Iowa re-elected him for this upcoming Congress in 2019. So he will still represent Iowa, despite making comments like this, time and time again. Thank you, Iowa. You're certainly on the right track. So my point at the end of all of this is just to show you that this is why the Republicans are always angry, why Donald Trump is always angry, and Donald Trump also has some other demons to face because he will be in an orange jumpsuit sometime in the future. I'm predicting that. And the Republicans know that they're no longer a wanted party. They are not welcome here, and I'm not ashamed to say that. They're not welcome here. I don't think so. And they're not welcome around me, to say the least. So, but for Trump and the Trump supporters and the Republican supporters, many people come to me and say, well, Brandon, why do they continue to support the Republicans? The Republicans aren't doing anything for them. The Republicans keep losing. Well, the people who support Republicans and Trump are the people that would rather just continue to drink the Kool-Aid. They are the people that want to willingly sacrifice their health care, that will willingly give up their Medicare, that will give up all the things that the Democrats in this country have given them because they earned it through their hard work and through them circumstances and their situations. They'd rather give all that up just to have any white man that they can get in that White House to validate their outdated racism and their hatred. And I've literally never in my life understood that because it's so illogical. It is just, words can't describe how idiotic that method of thinking is. So, my last point on this segment is to say that if the Republicans are so desperate that they are willing to rely on race baiting, that they're willing to remain silent on national domestic terrorist attacks where there are shootings nonstop, if they're willing to let this orange buffoon run around the country spewing his hatred just so they can have a slight sliver at a chance of re-election, there is no level that the Republican Party will not go. Because they've shown us time and time again that the only thing that matters to them is the win, is the continuing power of winning a re-election. So do not be surprised anymore. Anything that they do forward, from this moment forward, after you saw this segment, expect it. Expect for there to be more shootings. Expect for there to be more racist rhetoric. Because none of it's going to change until we get rid of Trump and until we give an even more resounding and an even more louder yelling and rebuke to them that this is not going to be tolerated in this country. And we'll continue along those lines after the break.
If people say your dreams are crazy, if they laugh at what you think you can do, good. Stay that way. Because what non-believers fail to understand is that calling a dream crazy is not an insult. It's a compliment. Don't try to be the fastest runner in your school or the fastest in the world. Be the fastest ever. Don't picture yourself wearing OBJ's jersey. Picture OBJ wearing yours. Don't settle for homecoming queen or linebacker. Do both. Lose 120 pounds and become an Iron Man after beating a brain tumor. Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody. If you're born a refugee, don't let it stop you from playing soccer for the national team at age 16. Don't become the best basketball player on the planet. Be bigger than basketball. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. When they talk about the greatest team in the history of the sport, make sure it's your team. If you have only one hand, don't just watch football, play it at the highest level. And if you're a girl from Compton, don't just become a tennis player. Become the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, that's more like it. So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
All right, everybody, so we are back now. Last week I reported on Sarah Huckabee Sanders and how she is a meritless, moralless, and despicable human being due to her unbridled lying. And now, this week, I'm going to report on a colleague of Sarah Huckabee Slanders, as I call her, who is also a disgraceful, unrelenting, unabashed, filthy, disgusting liar, and her name is Kellyanne the Con. Now, for all intents and purposes, her legal name is Kellyanne Conway, but for all intents and purposes of my show, she will be Kellyanne the Con, because that's exactly what the hell she is. She's a con artist. She is the con artist that is so famous for lying that she coined the term alternative facts. When she was questioned on why Trump's inauguration crowd size was one of, if not the smallest in history, that lie, in addition to the plethora of others at that time, got Kellyanne blacklisted and blocked from most credible cable news TV station.
Excuse me, it does not excuse, and you did not answer the question.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did not answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Chuck, do you think...
And just like the turd that won't go down the toilet, all of Kellyanne's lies seem to keep making their way back up to the surface and into the headlines. So if you'll remember last week with that fake video, that doctored up video that the White House and Sarah Huckabee Slanders put out that attempted to depict the CNN reporter Jim Acosta, tried to depict him as assaulting some White House intern, when in fact that this did not happen. Full stop, it did not happen. I was watching it myself. In fact, White House has even come out and removed Jim Acosta's press pass because of all of this. And by removing Jim Acosta's press pass, the White House is stopping him essentially from being able to do his job. So, to defend this doctored up fake video that eventually the White House did come out and identify and admit was a fake, sped up video, Kellyanne got her ass up on Sunday morning, this November 11th, and attempted to offer a defense of the White House when she said the following on the faux news, no news, aka Fox News Network. Here it is.
confrontation with Jim Acosta at that news conference. As you know, I have been very critical of Acosta's behavior myself, but I want to ask you about two responses by the White House. First, to tweet a video that was clearly altered to make it look like it was more of a physical confrontation than it really was, although I do think it was inappropriate. And second, to pull Acosta's pass to get into the White House and to threaten to do that to other reporters.
Well, Chris, first of all, what do you mean by edited or, as others are saying, quote, doctored video? He either put his hands on her and grabbed the mic back, or he did not, and he clearly did.
No, he clearly did, but the video was altered, and there are experts who have looked at it to make it speed it up to make it look, pardon?
Oh, well, that's not altered. That's sped up. They do it all the time in sports to see if there's actually a first down or a touchdown. So I have to disagree with the, I think, overwrought description of this video being doctored as if we put somebody else's arm in there.
I want to point out a few things after that video. Number one, I hate putting anything on here from that network, but I just had to do that. Number two, that speeding up indeed is altering a video, and Kellyanne, being a lawyer supposedly from whatever dollar store university she went to, should know that speeding up is altering. In fact, doing anything to a video that doesn't present it in its natural format is altering, legally defined, and I'm a person in medicine, and I even know that. Number three, in sports, which I don't know much about other than tennis, they don't speed up anything. In fact, they slow it down to make sure that they make their calls correctly. And number four, again, Jim Acosta, the man who works for CNN, did nothing to that young intern other than politely call her ma'am, as she ruthlessly tried to wrestle that microphone away from him. And here's the footage of the incident all over again, so you can see that my claims are true and valid from an unaltered, not sped up video.
In the midterms.
Here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants in this
all.
election
No,
to try to keep them?
I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. You know, they have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process, and I want people to come in, and we need the people.
Your campaign.
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's
I
not an invasion.
Honestly, you know what?
Away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings
Let
would
me
be
ask,
much better.
if I may ask one other question. Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr.
Excuse
President,
me, that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
So, after this incident, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in all of her deceitful glory, okay, she, like I said, removed his press pass. So that stopped him from being able to do his job. So, I'm now happy to report that CNN filed a lawsuit against the White House demanding that freedom of press live on and that Jim Acosta be granted his press pass back and be allowed to continue to do his work. Quote, CNN filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration this morning in D.C. District Court. It demands the return of the White House credentials of CNN's chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. The wrongful revocation of these credentials violates CNN and Acosta's First Amendment rights of freedom of the press and their Fifth Amendment rights to due process. We have asked the court for an immediate restraining order requiring the press pass be returned to Jim and will seek permanent relief as a part of this process. While the suit is specific to CNN and Acosta, this could have happened to anyone. If left unchallenged, the actions of the White House would create a dangerous, chilling effect for any journalist who covers our elected officials, end quote. And of course, Sarah Huckabee slanders, as I call her, the slandering liar that she is. She had to respond naturally, right? She offered another lie. Here it is. Quote, "We have been advised that CNN has filed a complaint challenging the suspension of Jim Acosta's hard pass. This is just more grandstanding from CNN, and we will vigorously defend against this lawsuit. CNN, who has nearly 50 additional hard pass holders, and Mr. Acosta is no more or less special than any other media outlet or reporter with respect to the First Amendment." After Mr. Acosta asked the president 2 questions, each of which the president answered, he physically refused to surrender a White House microphone. Oh, now she wants to tell the truth. Excuse me. He physically refused to surrender a White House microphone to an intern so that other reporters might ask their questions. This was not the first time this reporter has inappropriately refused to yield to other reporters. The White House cannot run an orderly and fair press conference when a reporter acts this way, which is neither appropriate nor professional. The First Amendment is not served when a single reporter of more than 150 presidents attempts to monopolize the floor. If there is no check on this type of behavior, it impedes the ability of the so-called president, the White House staff, and members of the media to conduct business, end quote. And I'm sorry, I had to chuckle during that. This whole line of, if there is no check on this type of behavior, it impedes the ability of the so-called president, the White House staff, and members to do its business. And she also says that, what did she say here? When a reporter acts this way, which is neither appropriate nor professional, I have to laugh at that because she can't be serious. She can't be serious, but the sad thing is that she is serious because Donald Trump is in the White House. That's neither appropriate nor professional. Her lying on a daily basis without remorse or a thought given, it's like literally an input and an output with her to just lie, period. It's just an automatic response for her. It's not even conditioned. It's just an innate, automatic, unconscious response for her to lie. That's not appropriate or professional. Yet, him refusing to yield a microphone. Now, that's a lie, but he did not give the microphone to the intern. At least she's telling the truth there. He did not give her the microphone. But that's a far cry from assaulting that intern like she tried to say initially. And to make a long story short, she's a liar. Sarah slanders. So is Kellyanne the con. And I'm even happier to report that as of Friday, November 16th, a judge ordered that the White House is to immediately return Jim Acosta's press pass, and I'm very happy for him. I'm very happy for CNN. I'm very happy for the press, for, the press everywhere. Not even the press that actually do this, the professionals who do this every day, but the people like me who have these podcasts who are trying to spread the word of truth, spread the word of justice to people, to get people to pay attention to stupid shit like this. Because when this type of shit that the White House is doing goes unchecked, that is when we have problems, and that is when we slowly slide down to being a country like Russia or some other dumb country like that, okay? I'm going to move on to the next segment without taking a break this time. I know that that's a little different than usual, but this one we're just going to keep rolling right into it. Now, continuing on with the spirit of lawsuits, the state of Maryland has filed an injunction against the White House. The state of Maryland is suing, in essence, Donald Trump and the White House for their illegal and fake appointment of that Matthew Whitaker, who is supposedly the acting attorney general. Quote, the state of Maryland asked the federal judge on Tuesday for an injunction declaring that Mr. Whitaker is not the legitimate acting attorney general as a matter of law, and that the position and all of its powers instead rightfully belong to the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Continuing on, Mr. Trump may not bypass the constitutional and statutory requirements for appointing someone to that office. End quote. This injunction is just another piece of the growing dissent against this Matthew Whitaker being the acting attorney general, instead of the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who is still the Deputy Attorney General and by law is the acting Attorney General, not this juice head Matthew Whitaker, right? So, Donald Trump does have a defense for his appointing of Matthew Whitaker, and it's not one that he made up on his own. It's one that the lawyers that work for him came up with. And they're basing their defense of this appointing Matthew Whitaker on the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, which is a legitimate law. And it states that any president may temporarily fill any vacant cabinet position with anyone who is a senior official and has been in that department for 90 days. So, basically, if Donald Trump fires one of his cabinet members, according to this law, he's supposedly able to pick anybody else that was working for that official, and they can, as long as they've been there for 90 days, they can take that position. That's a very broad law, and Matthew Whitaker does meet those guidelines. I'm not going to argue that. That's a very valid point. However, this law falls short of a more specific law. Quote, another statute specifically says the Deputy Attorney General is the next in line at the Justice Department. Let me repeat that. Another statute specifically says that the Deputy Attorney General, who would be Rod Rosenstein, is next in line at the Justice Department. A more specific law takes the lawsuit, a more specific law that this is, takes precedence when there's a conflict with a more general law. Continuing on, the Maryland filing also cites a part of the Constitution known as the Appointments Clause, the same one that I mentioned last week, which requires all principal officers, very powerful and senior officers like the Attorney General, to be confirmed first by the Senate, end quote. So, basically put, Donald Trump in his Federal Vacancies Reform Act falls very short to the Appointment Clause of the Constitution and this other law that specifically states should anything happen to the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, by law, takes that position. It's undebatable on its face and according to law, which is what the Republican Party is supposed to be all about, the rule of law. Come on, it's the rule of law. It's right here, right? I want to reiterate that the stakes of this case are very high because the old Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, had to recuse himself from overseeing Robert Mueller's investigation of Donald Trump working with the Russians to take over America and take the country. And because he had to recuse himself is why Donald Trump fired Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, because he needs somebody who will fire Robert Mueller when he impulsively decides to do that. So he put Matthew Whitaker, a cowardly juice head, into this position who has no credibility to do it, who himself is under federal FBI investigation for fraud and stealing thousands and thousands of dollars from a company that he worked with and was an advising board member for. He doesn't deserve to be in this position, but he's there because he's someone who publicly has denounced Robert Mueller's investigation in the past, and is someone that will gladly fire Mueller if Trump tells him to do so. So basically, this is just Donald Trump not draining the swamp. This is Donald Trump making the swamp even more disgusting than when he first got there. So the House and Senate Democrats are attempting to pass legislation to protect Mueller. They're trying to add it to the upcoming federal budget legislation that is going to have to pass, or we will be in another shutdown. This is Republican Senator Jeff Flake from Arizona, and although his name is a pun, and an easy one at that, I do want to point out that Jeff Flake is quite literally a flake. One of the most recent examples of Jeff Flake being a flake is the Brett Kavanaugh debacle. When all of the junk went down, Jeff Flake was approached by two women in the halls of the Senate, and they asked him to at least have a full investigation of all of the charges against Brett Kavanaugh. Jeff Flake asked for that investigation to be done as if he actually had a human conscience and a human heart, right? However, when Trump ordered that sham and incomplete investigation of Brett Kavanaugh, Jeff Flake voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh even with the incomplete investigation. After he said he wanted a complete one, and he thinks that it's very important to investigate whether Brett Kavanaugh really committed sexual assault. And even though it wasn't done, he still voted for Brett Kavanaugh to be confirmed. So, Jeff Flake is not he's not seeking re-election. In fact, if he was, he would have had to run in these past midterm elections, which he did not, which is how Kristen Sinema, the Democrat, won that Senate seat in Arizona, which I'll get to later. But now that Jeff Flake is not going to be an active Republican in the Senate anymore, now he decides he wants to use his voice and do the right thing. Because that's what cowards do. That's what Republicans do. They're cowards. They speak up when they're on their way out the door. They don't speak up when it's time to be a profile in courage. Very rarely do we ever see a Republican do that. In fact, Robert Mueller is the only Republican, and he is a registered Republican. He's the only Republican as of late that is doing the right thing. Anyways, the changes in Congress don't take place until January of next year. So as it stands right now, Jeff Flake still has a voice for the rest of November and for December. And he has tried several times to get this bill that he worked with the Democrats on. Surprisingly, he worked with the Democrats to make this bill to protect Robert Mueller from being fired by Donald Trump or Matthew Whitaker. However, every time he tries to bring it up for a vote, this man, the Republican Senate Majority Leader, Senator Mitch McConnell, who looks like a tortoise, keeps rejecting those votes. So, now that he continues to reject those votes, Jeff Flake is upset. And now he's been threatening to withhold his vote from all the upcoming judge appointments that Donald Trump has in line for this year, because Donald Trump has to hurry up and get his judges approved before the Democrats take over the House in January. This is what Jeff Flake had to say.
One further note on this unanimous consent request that has just failed today. Senator Coons and I are prepared to make it again and again until there is a vote on this vital bipartisan legislation on the Senate floor. And I have informed the Majority Leader that I will not vote to advance any of the 21 judicial nominees pending in the Judiciary Committee or vote to confirm the 32 judges awaiting confirmation on the Senate floor until S. 2644 is brought to the full Senate for a vote. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield to the senator from Delaware.
Mr. President. Senator from Delaware.
So this is significant, right? Because with Jeff Flake withholding his vote, in addition to another Republican senator, Susan Collins, withholding her votes from all of these judges, the Republicans now don't have enough votes to get any judge through. And with that being said, they're not going to give their votes until the Republicans pass this law, this bill, into law to allow Mueller to be protected. It's interesting. And I'm glad that they're actually attempting to do something, even though it is cowardly, but something is better than nothing at this point. So, continue to watch this space, and I'll be back after the break.
This is you at the U.S. Open. This is you. Good service motion. Boom! Very good. Keep that perfect service motion you have. Right there. Good. Boom! Switch to the backhand. Lean into it. Good follow through. Take the net. Nice try. Make sure you're controlling that ball on every shot. There you go. Very good. Back, back, back. Put it away. Be tough, just like you want to win. Just like you at the U.S. Open. Right there. This is you. Very good, Serena Williams.
So, in addition to lying, cheating, and stealing, and other manipulative ways of retaining power, the Republican Party likes to do a lot of reacting and distracting as their way of coping with losing arguments and with losing elections. That is to say, whenever there's breaking news that exposes a Republican for another fraudulent act, or yet another corrupt action, or adultery, or any of the plethora of things that the Republican Party does consistently yet judges other people for, they love to react and distract with screaming voices and howls of conspiracy theories. Let's begin in Florida, where a recount of all the ballots is currently taking place. The governor and the Senate, I meant to say that. There's a recount going on in Florida for the governor's race and the Senate race. In response to that recount going on, the Republicans started spreading conspiracy theories of voter fraud. I mean, here we go again with this nonsense. They even alleged that the Broward County supervisor was incompetent and that she was creating votes out of thin air because she has magic powers, right? You know, she's just, poof, here's another vote. Here's the real deal, though. Quote, Florida Circuit Chief Judge Jack Tudor said that there is no evidence of wrongdoing in Broward County. End quote. No evidence of voter fraud. But here we go with the Republicans. Oh my God, there's voter fraud. Because that's just what they do. They've even terminated that lady that was the supervisor of the Broward County Election Board. However, it should be known that she's done this for years, never meeting election deadlines. So that was kind of her own doing. But the fact that the Republicans are going around here spouting voter fraud is just simply unacceptable. The next wave of reacting and distracting occurred in Georgia. In Georgia, we had the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, running against the Democrat, Stacey Abrams. And this was a significant thing because the Republicans have done their typical voter suppression in ways that have not been seen in any other state. Brian Kemp has quite literally gone above and beyond for voter suppression in Georgia. He enacted the exact match law, which is this law that stops the registrations of people who don't have their names spelled exactly the same in every system. So if you're missing the hyphen between your two last names, if you have two last names, or if someone spelled your name with one L or one R instead of two, then you cannot register to vote. Brian Kemp also went on to order a blocking of all absentee and provisional ballots, which includes the soldiers overseas who live in Georgia. He blocked those. And then, these were just his attempts to stop every vote from being counted. Because in Georgia, there was a record turnout of voters in person, early voters, absentee voters, and provisional ballots. And Brian Kemp and the Republican Party all knew that all of these votes turning out were not going to be in their favor. To put the cherry on top, Brian Kemp even went as far as to say that the Democrat Party hacked the Republican Party in the voter machines just days before the election. I mean, come on. Again, this was all reacting to a possible defeat and finding a way to distract it. Because Brian Kemp just could not live with himself if he lost to an African American female. Quote, though Republican Brian Kemp declared victory over Democrat Stacey Abrams on Monday evening, District Judge Amy Totenberg blocked the state from certifying election results until Friday at 5 p.m. and issued guidance on provisional ballots, according to the Associated Press. Totenberg also ordered Georgia's Secretary of State office to establish and publicize a hotline or website where voters can check whether their provisional ballots were counted, and if not, give the reason why. Then there's this quote. In a separate ruling, Tuesday morning, U.S. District Court Judge Lee Martin May ruled that election officials violated voters' civil rights by rejecting absentee ballots because of missing or incorrect birth dates. May ruled that the county must accept these ballots, end quote. In other words, Georgia's courts overruled Brian Kemp's corrupt decision to block all of these votes and said that they must be counted. Excuse me. Now that the last election results I have shows that Republican Brian Kemp is in the lead at 50.3% and Stacey Abrams is at 48.8%. So, these recounts are going on, but as you know, Friday has passed and Stacey Abrams, as of Friday, November 16th, has conceded and given up on that election. And I just want to point out that she gave her best, and the fact that in Georgia she came within this close says a lot, and the Republican Party better be scared. And this voter suppression, we all need to start mobilizing on it immediately. We can't wait until 2020, until days before. We can't wait. We need to get on it today. Now we move on to Arizona, where the Republicans were just relentlessly going on and on and on and on about more voter fraud, illegal people voting, just a bunch of nonsense, right? And again, this is the seat that's up for election because Jeff Flake, the Republican, resigned from his seat effective in January. Donald Trump decided to make more, which I thought was impossible, more of an ass of himself by suggesting that an entirely new election be done in Arizona, which was never going to happen. And he did not get his way, of course. He lost that debate, and he lost the election. Democrat Kristen Sinema has officially won the Senate election of Arizona, making her the first female senator from Arizona and the first Democrat to win a Senate seat in Arizona in over 30 years. And it just makes me damn good to report on that. I love a good old Republican loss, let me tell you. Now let's talk about the caravan. The caravan is this large number of thousands of people coming from Central America, and they're walking to the Mexican border with the United States. For weeks, Donald Trump and his Republican thugs in Congress have attempted to vilify and attempted to cast these people as being criminals, thugs, rapists, drug dealers, and they've even gone as far as saying that there are Middle Eastern terrorists hiding within the Hispanic people in that caravan. I mean, because we all know that clearly this is the preferred route, right, for Middle Eastern terrorists to come to America. I mean, they're going to fly from wherever they're coming from in the Middle East, fly to Central America, and then they're going to walk in a caravan thousands of miles just so they can get to the Mexican border, and they may or may not get into the United States, so they can commit terrorism. Because that makes sense. That's certainly the way I would go about doing it, right? Okay, that's just dumb. Since the election, Donald Trump has remained mum on the caravan. We have literally not heard a single peep from him about this issue, except for one tweet where he said that he was going to sign some ridiculous proclamation stating that if they came, he was not going to allow them to apply for asylum, which is not going to fly in the courts, so no one needs to even get upset about that. We got to learn how to start picking our battles better. He can't do that. The end. Although Donald Trump has kept mum on this, he did send 6,000 troops to the Mexican border. And this is literally one of the biggest stunts and shows, as we say in the gay community. Stunts and shows is when you're putting on an act for the people because you need an audience. And Donald Trump needs his base. He needs his audience. So he's sending the troops down there to make himself look so strong. But here's the thing. It's literally illegal for the troops that are there to do anything other than stare at the sunset when the caravan gets to the border. And that is because of this law called the Posse Comitatus Act, and I'm probably saying that wrong. But anyways, it's a law from 1878, and it prohibits the government from using active duty troops to enhance laws inside the United States border. What that means is the troops that are there cannot do anything other than, like I just said, stare at the sunset. They can yell at the people, They can look intimidating, but they can't do anything. And that's no disrespect to our armed services members, whom I respect with utmost respect. And I am eternally grateful for them being able to do something that I would never have the guts to do. But I have to laugh at Donald Trump for this. And I feel bad for our troops because they're quite literally being made a joke out of. Like, Donald Trump is using them as a prop in a show to go to this border where they can do nothing. I mean, this is why we have police and ICE. Okay? So what does it all amount to? Exactly what I said. Them reacting and distracting. Okay? Donald Trump lost the midterm elections in a big way, and he continues to lose more and more seats and record history-setting numbers. So he needs to keep his base, keep them happy. So I'm going to send the troops down there to stare at the sunset. So, through all of this reacting and distracting, there's one thing that has gotten lost in the news cycle, and I blame that on the media, because it is something that actually deserves some noteworthy attention, and that is the fact that North Korea has not stopped their nuclear developments. Quote, new commercial satellite images show 16 hidden bases that contradict Trump's claim that his diplomatic efforts led to the elimination of a nuclear and missile program that North Korea warned could reach the United States, end quote. Donald Trump has previously touted this accomplishment of stopping Kim Jong-un from having these nuclear missiles, and that they came up with this great deal, and Kim Jong-un sent him a love letter, and they just so in love with each other, and he's not going to make no more nuclear missiles, and Trump thinks that he should get the Nobel Peace Prize, and everyone's saying that he deserves it. No one has said that he deserves it. No one has nominated him for it. He will never, ever win it. Ever. Let me reiterate that. It's never going to happen. But let's point out the fact that he's failed at something else. Okay? In his business life, he failed in his casinos. He failed in his fake Trump University. He's failed at everything he's touched. Everything. Now he's failing in matters of national security, in that North Korea, has 16 nuclear bases. Something he's not talking about, something the media's not talking about. We're talking about caravans where troops cannot do anything. Meanwhile, we have 16 nuclear bases in North Korea, but no one's talking about that. Trump has kept silent on this for a reason, because he knows he's failed. He knows he's failed. But he can't afford to point out another failure in addition to losing the House of Representatives to the Democrats and losing some Senate seats as well. So, maybe Donnie T has kept silent on it because he's too busy pouting, too busy sulking. And I think that that's exactly what he's been doing. Because let's just look at what he's done this week. Let's start with him being in Europe. Trump berated and attempted to yell at Theresa May, the Prime Minister of our ally, Great Britain, when she called to congratulate him on the midterm elections. Now, granted, that was probably not the smartest thing for her to do, but she tried to congratulate him on democracy, and he screamed at her. And then he sat and cried during his days in Europe because the French president, Emmanuel Macron, whom is a real man, he's Emmanuel Macron, and I'm going to leave it at that. He gave a public rebuke of Donald Trump's nationalism that was a clear and direct shot at Trump, and Trump sat there and did nothing because he is a coward. And the French people also blew up that infamous large baby Trump blimp, and they had it fly over Paris while Trump was in Paris. And it should be noted that in all of his cowardly bitch-assness, Donald Trump did not respond at all in any way, shape, form, or fashion to Macron or to the baby blimp. He did not respond until he left Europe in which he responded on Twitter like a little high school teenager instead of a 70-year-old grown man. And there you have it, folks. Donald Trump and the Republicans are failing, and they're scrambling to pick up the pieces of what's left of their fragmented and dying party. And they were so busy spending this entire 2 years with Donald Trump in office with focusing on the wants, the needs, and the racism of their silent majority in the United States. Here's the thing, though. Here's the underlying message between the lines, was that the 2018 midterm elections showed the Republicans one thing if it showed them nothing else, and that is that their silent majority ended up being nothing more than a loud and boisterous minority, because the people that are on the right side of history that are fighting them are the true majority. And we won. And we're going to keep winning. And I'll see you after the break.
If I had lost my medicine, I don't know what I would ever do. That would lead me to death. And I don't understand why people would think to do that.
When I see them on TV taking kids away from their parents, it's scary.
I heard if you zigzag when you run, like, the shooter's less likely to shoot you, so I've always been thinking, like, if a shooter ever comes into a classroom, like, I would, like, run through the back door and, like, zigzag out of the school. So, like, I think about that on a daily basis.
I think it is patriotic to protest.
My dad had a car wreck, and the doctor gave him pain pills, and he just got really addicted to them. So he wasn't there for 4 of my birthdays.
I feel pretty bad about people taking away my health care.
I'm one of those sick people that you're trying to take medicine away.
Oh, hello. My name is Ruben, and I am 11 years old.
We need politicians that are actually going to do something about it.
But I can't vote.
I can't vote.
I can't vote.
I can't vote.
So vote for me.
Vote for me.
For me.
For me.
So vote for me.
So I want to talk about being baseless. Baseless is defined as having no foundation in fact. Baseless is a term that very accurately describes and defines anything that comes out of the mouth of Donald J. Trump. In essence, baseless is a more professional and a more, I guess you could say, appropriate way of calling people a liar, or basically just saying someone is out of their mind. It's very nice, nasty, and in my opinion, I like to use it to describe Donald Trump in this dumbass statement that he made on Thursday, November 15th, 2018. Quote, "The Republicans don't win, and that's because of potentially illegal votes," he said to the Daily Caller. "When people get in line that have absolutely no right to vote, and they go around in circles. Sometimes they go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. Nobody takes anything. It's really a disgrace what's going on." End quote. So I had to take pause while I was reading that because I want to reiterate just how difficult it is for me to have to dumb myself down to read and try to interpret anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. At any rate, I want to reiterate again that 90 to 99% of anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth are lies, and they are lies that his very immature and underdeveloped mind forces him to believe. Okay, so let's let him sulk in the corner like a child and believe in whatever lies he wants to believe in. I am going to point out this, though. I picked this quote because I need to shed light on the fact of how stupid and dumb the quote was, but also to shed light on the fact that this is how conspiracy theories get started, because they have people in powerful positions make up these ridiculous lies, and then their dumb base of supporters or whoever decides to believe them. Okay? This is the dumbest thing that arguably the dumbest thing that he said ever. I mean, because we all know at least everyone who's voted before knows that you cannot just go change your clothes and go vote again. This is why you have to take an ID with you to go vote, right? So they can check to make sure you're registered to vote, and so they can track to make sure that you're not voting in several different places. And this is why I argue why we should not have anyone in government that does not have any previous political experience and that doesn't even have a 5th grade understanding of civics. I mean, clearly he has no familiarity or relationship with the law in any way, shape, form, or fashion to make this statement that you could vote again by changing your clothes. Okay. In other news, now it's time for the Democratic Party, it's time for them to get some much needed scrutiny from me at this time because I'm very disappointed with the Democratic Party. Meet Nancy Pelosi. She is the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives in history, and she is the most effective leader in history ever in the House of Representatives. And now she is, of course, the most attacked. One of the ugliest common things in American culture is a culture of misogyny, where men, in their minds, rule the world and are entitled to control everything. This culture causes men to receive most of the credit for almost anything that happens, despite who really caused those things to happen, which is women. But be not confused, though. Nancy Pelosi is a master legislator that is responsible for the success of Obama's Affordable Care Act, Obama's stimulus packages that restarted the economy after Bush destroyed it, and many other legislative accolades. Nancy Pelosi is also the only Democrat that is bringing in substantial funds to the Democrat Party because she does some of the most successful fundraising. However, since the Republicans started using her as someone to attack when they started to take over seats during Obama's presidency around 2010, that made Nancy Pelosi lose a lot of popularity in America because America blamed her for the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. But instead of sticking together, the Democrats are turning their back on Nancy Pelosi. Quote, "The Republican playbook for the past 4 election cycles has been very focused, very clear. Representative Kathleen Rice, a Democrat from New York, insisted after Ossoff's defeat. It's been an attack on our leader. Is it fair? No. Are the attacks accurate? No. But guess what? They work." End quote. Well, at least this Democrat knows that it's not fair and that the attacks are not accurate. But what is she doing about it? She's apparently turning her back on Nancy Pelosi, not doing the right thing by standing by her. Another woman, another Democrat. Very disappointed. It is important to note that these attacks are not based on Nancy Pelosi's merit or her ability to do her job. They're based on her gender and because of her success and her ambition, right? That is why in each ad, the Republicans make it a point to point out that any man that is a Democrat working underneath Nancy Pelosi is somehow less masculine than they are because they don't go with Nancy Pelosi. Now, Nancy Pelosi is more left or more liberal than most independent voters and most Democrat voters. I will agree with that. However, it is the Republicans that are just obsessed with getting rid of Nancy Pelosi. So in my opinion, that makes them less masculine since they're the ones so obsessed with getting rid of her because they fear her. Okay? The thing I want you to understand the most out of this debate is that the better women are at defeating men, defeating Republicans, the more they get vilified, the more they get made out to be the enemy. And that is simply not acceptable and is not going to fly here. I stand 100% behind Nancy Pelosi. Full stop. She deserves to be the House Speaker once more, especially at this time when we have that idiot in the White House. We need someone who can lead this party, not some novice. That brings me to my next point. A novice. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the newly elected freshman congresswoman from New York. She is 29 years old, and she is the youngest person elected to Congress. So instead of spending her time in D.C. recently, finding a place to live, maybe attending a few orientation sessions, learning how to be a congresswoman since this is her first time, she decided to take her progressive ass right on down to Nancy Pelosi's office to join protesters. Quote, "This is not about personality. This is not about rebuke. This is not about confrontation. It's about making sure we are getting the job done," she declared moments before she spoke to young activists who staged a sit-in to demand a new Green Deal to address climate change of Miss Pelosi. She said, "I think she really appreciates civic engagement," end quote. So, excuse me, I'm going to let you finish, Alexandria. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I just need to get a few things clear with you. Hopefully you will hear this show. You're a newly elected member to Congress, and you took your seat in New York from another Democrat. I'm not going to belabor that issue, but I want to point that out. That was foul. You aren't even on active duty yet in Congress. You don't take your seat until January of 2019. Do you even have a house yet? Do you have an apartment? Do you know where you're going to stay? Do you know how to go when you even vote for the next House Speaker? Do you know these things? I want to say, before you start beating your chest and bringing protest against the party you're a part of, you should humble yourself. Humble yourself and realize that there are bigger fish to fry right now, like Donald Trump. Humble yourself and realize that this country is near losing its democracy, okay? So I'm sorry if climate change and green deals are not as important as the pressing agenda of healthcare and getting rid of Donald Trump. And while I agree with you that there needs to be a more progressive turnover within the Democrat Party, we need more diversity, we need more young people, I agree with all that. I stand with you 100%, Alexandria. However, I insist that you humble yourself when it comes to this Democrat leader who has proven herself and who has been there for decades and who is the first woman to do it. Humble yourself for this woman who paved the way for you to be on Congress. I'll come to conclude after the break.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear war, obstructed justice at the FBI, and in direct violation of the Constitution, he's taken money from foreign governments and threatened to shut down news organizations that report the truth. If that isn't a case for impeaching and removing a dangerous president, then what has our government become? I'm Tom Steyer, and like you, I'm a citizen who knows it's up to us to do something. It's why I'm funding this effort to raise our voices together and demand that elected officials take a stand on impeachment. A Republican Congress once impeached a president for far less. Yet today, people in Congress and his own administration know that this president is a clear and present danger, who's mentally unstable and armed with nuclear weapons. And they do nothing. Join us and tell your member of Congress that they have a moral responsibility to stop doing what's political and start doing what's right. Our country depends on it.
Donald Trump, the chump-in-chief of the United States, made the decision to not attend an event to honor America's fallen soldiers that fought in the First World War. The reason Donald Trump canceled his appearance to this event was because of a steady rain that supposedly prevented his helicopter from traveling to the cemetery where the American soldiers laid. And of course, Sarah Sanders was prompt and present with another lie to justify Donald Trump not attending this event to commemorate America's fallen soldiers. She said that since Donald Trump could not take his helicopter due to the rain, he would have had to take a motorcade, which would require shutting down large portions of Paris's roadways on short notice, and Trump didn't want to cause that much disruption to the city and to the people of Paris. Trump's decision to not attend this event got him much needed and much deserved worldwide bashing. The grandson of Winston Churchill went to Twitter and said, quote, "They died with their face to the foe, and that pathetic, inadequate Donald Trump couldn't even defy the weather to pay his respects to the fallen. Hashtag he's not fit to represent," end quote. I keep speaking and repeating that Donald Trump refused to honor the fallen soldiers because It sheds light on his lies that he's a nationalist and loves America so much and that he loves the troops so much. In fact, people like German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, have much more respect and love for America's fallen soldiers, as they did attend the event, and they were holding hands in solidarity. Then there's also the times that Obama did his duty as a legitimate president, including attending that same event in which it also rained on him. But the rain didn't stop President Barack Obama from fulfilling his duties and honoring our soldiers. But when you have a draft dodger like Donald Trump squatting in the White House, we should expect nothing more than more pathetic and disgraceful behavior from him. My last point is the fact that so many Americans and Trump supporters are upset about African Americans that protest by taking a knee during the national anthem because it disrespects soldiers. But where are all those people in their outrage when Donald Trump didn't think it was worth honoring World War I veterans just because it was raining and he didn't want to get his toupee wet? The hypocrisy is sickening. It's disgusting. It's infuriating. People are going to peacefully protest ignorance and injustice, and that does not make us any less American than any of you Trump supporters. If anything, it makes us more American than you. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching this week's episode of Backstories. May you all have a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels if you're traveling. Please remember to like us on Facebook at Backstories US, on Twitter and Instagram at Brandon Dais, and subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube. This episode is available on YouTube, iTunes, and podcasts, and you can find more information at www.backstories-us.com. I look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of Backstories with me, Brandon Dais, and I can swear to you right now, it will not be your everyday show on politics.